Blimey. Ooh, this is one out of a jam jar you got here.
Warning. The House of Mystery contains demons, angels, elementals, magicians, wizards, apparitions, adult language, and discussions. If you're easily offended, do not enter the House of Mystery.
All right, then. On with the show.
All right, hello, welcome everyone to the House of Mystery, the John Constantine and Friends podcast. I am Michael, your host, and we are back. Look at us, David. Look at us. We are back, first show of our new podcast season. And can you believe we are starting the year with some new, proper John Constantine.
It feels so good. It does feel like I'm back in the 80s.
Does it?
Kind of.
Do you like the 80s, David?
I love the 80s. I'm sorry.
Yeah, why not? All right, so Cy Spurrier David has returned along with Aaron Campbell to continue what they started in, the tail end of 2019 with that one shot. And it's about time to, because we've been on the longest Hellblazer hiatus since the title's conception.
Yes.
DC, as a display of their infallible, absolute genius, decided to sideline the character.
For some strange reason.
Which still baffles so many of its longtime readers, us included. Like, why do such a thing? Makes no sense. But this is a new year. We have things to be happy about, and we are thankful to be covering in this episode John Constantine, Hellblazer, Dead in America, #1. If you are new to this podcast, you can find all of our episodes past, present, and in the future wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search House of Mystery and be sure to give us a thumbs up if you are a YouTube viewer. All right, David. So Cy Spurrier did not waste any time getting things going. The devised narrative was constructed to quickly transition from the previous 12 issues.
Yes.
In fact, Spurrier did what I had suggested during one of our episode discussions, if you remember last year, David, that it would be a good idea to include a recap of sorts, because 3 years is a long time.
Oh, absolutely.
And the JC, the John Constantine pond, needs to be restocked. I mean, the less barriers between creators and new readers, preferably younger readers, is important. And let's say you have some new readers discovering comic books and let's say they were 14, 15 years old 3 years ago. Well, they've matured, their tastes have probably changed a bit, and they're looking for something new to read. They're now 18, 19 years old. They're probably going to want to pick something up like this. And oftentimes, you have those obstacles when it comes to the history of a particular character like John Constantine that has 300 plus issues under its belt.
Yes.
So how do you update people with the necessities, things they need to know in order to understand this story? Well, Spurrier did it quite nicely with that whole, what you missed splash page.
Yes.
Which I'm extremely thankful for that, because just me as a human being, I'm very forgetful and I'm quite dumb at times. And even though I recently just reread those 12 issues, there's things that I forgot. So just going through that splash page and knowing that it's giving us the needed information to understand the overall context of what we're about to read was something I think a lot of other writers should start doing.
Oh, no, absolutely. It's something that I've not seen in a very long time that comic books in general in present day have used. Where
they'll do those silly little asterisks.
Yeah, they'll do
where they say read blah, blah, blah.
But I used to remember in comic books and probably in the 70s, they would at least give the first page to explain, hey, this is what happened last time.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I thought it was a really good way for Spurrier to use and just make sure that his audience understands, hey, I've already explained the setting. This is John Constantine. This is what has happened. And making sure that he doesn't have to backtrack.
Mm-hmm.
And if he does, there's a specific reason why he's backtracking or re-explaining something. Maybe it ties more deeper into a story. I think doing that as a comic book writer is really helpful so that you don't find yourself repeating yourself.
It encourages impulse readers, people that are at the comic book shop, maybe, not scrolling. What's the word I'm looking for, David?
Flipping the page.
Flipping the pages. I think most of us are very familiar with that type of behavior in a comic book shop when we're looking for something new to read.
Yeah.
And when you're, turning the page, and by page 2 you see that there's a introduction that clues you in on what's happening, that definitely sways the potential reader to buy. And that's important. You need, for a title like this in today's climate, we need every new reader. We
Yeah.
need every new advantage, because look what happened last time with a series that was written so well. And I'm talking, of course, of Suspiria's previous John Constantine run. So well, just well done. And it's a tragedy that, yes, it's a tragedy. Never mind the wars that are happening and we're about to enter into World War III. This is the tragedy
This
of
is a great
humankind.
tragedy.
Yes, it is a tragedy.
It
all
is a
right.
tragedy.
It's a tragedy that his storyline just didn't, I don't want to say resonate, because that sounds like it was culturally irrelevant.
It didn't
and that's
connect.
not true. It just unfortunately didn't connect with the broader readership.
Yeah, because
And not because it didn't connect because there was any type of barriers preventing people from appreciating and understanding. I'm talking about sheer marketing barriers.
And you got to remember, on social media, the one post that we constantly made fun of when DC posted it up was someone
Don't bring it up.
someone actually cheering, and a bunch of fans cheering that, oh, a new John Constantine story is coming out. We're not going to say what the writer was.
It's now a famous story on this podcast.
Yeah. And yet right underneath you had various writers and even DC saying, hey guys, this isn't, you do know that there's a story going on with John Constantine.
No, that was
going on right now.
Suspiria. He
Yeah.
retweeted a person's reply to another writer that was writing a John Constantine story. And the person who tweeted said that, oh my God, I can't believe there's a new ongoing John Constantine series. And he was talking about the one that Tom Taylor was working on.
Yes.
That's what it was, Tom Taylor. And Suspiria, just swooping on into the comment section, was like, he retweets it with a comment. He's all, I believe he just put a bunch of question marks. That was it. Because at that time, he had already been, I think we were moving into issue 10.
Yes. Yeah.
So almost a year gone by of an ongoing John Constantine story, and nobody had heard about it. And that ultimately was the travesty or the tragedy that I was talking about, that it just, people didn't know it was there until it was too late, and then it was canceled. So I don't want that to happen this time. So having, eliminating any way you can eliminate the most barriers to readership, to new readership, is you have to do it. You have to work. That's has to be in everyone's strategy now when they are putting together new books.
Yes. Is basically just making sure to keep the audience hooked onto your story.
Make sure people can fucking find it.
Yes.
Another thing I totally dig, Spurrier's obvious affection for Gaiman's iconic work, just like with his 2019 Hellblazer that relied on the books of magic as a jumping off point. He now uses elements from the original Sandman story itself to situate the narrative within a pre-existent mythology. Spurrier doesn't just know the source material. He understands the readership. That's why this is key to me. Something that a lot of creators / decision makers, etc., seem to have lost sight of. So he knows that we as Constantine fans are deeply entrenched in Vertigo in general, for the most part, most of us.
Oh yeah, especially since Sandman himself is so tied to the origins of John Constantine. You got to remember that basically when Sandman first started up, technically that was John Constantine's first appearance with Sandman, where I think it was.
Well, I thought
Sandman.
Swamp Thing was his real first appearance.
His first
right?
real appearance was in Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
But like his early days.
This is all around the same time period.
This is all around the same time period, and like
give or take
like,
a year or two.
This is when John Constantine was. You could say he was in the infancy stages of his character.
Absolutely, yeah.
And like his appearance in Sandman pushed the character's narrative even more, and his popularity even more, because people were like seeing him from Swamp Thing into Sandman and saying, "Oh, you know, this character has potential to be really good." And the story with him in Sandman is still one of my favorite issues in all the run of Sandman, where it's
a great story.
It's a great story that doesn't necessarily fit the character of Dream. It fits more the character of Constantine, because Constantine's motivations are more tied to it.
The whole issue with Rachel.
Yeah,
and
it's
bag
like
of sand.
And you find out this is what Constantine's willing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I just appreciate that, you know, the both Campbell and Spurrier are very much aware of the readership. That's what's important for all IPs, David. I do not want creators. In fact, I hate when I say creators, I mean comic book writers, TV writers, movie writers, directors, producers, publishing gods. They all go to social media and seem to think that that's the consensus. Like, if they say they want something, we're going to give it to you. I'm not a fan of creators, Dave, giving fans exactly what they want, because many times, let's be honest, we don't know what we want. We're not the writers. We don't know what we want necessarily. But if you are hired to write, let's say, a John Constantine story, you by default should understand the readership, and you don't need to go to social media and give them exactly what they're asking for. No, because you know the spirit. You understand what makes this particular IP work. And that's what Spurrier shows when he uses things from Neil Gaiman's earlier run, that he gets it. He understands what the real the origins, if you will, of Constantine, whether it be loosely connected to early Vertigo or actually substantially connected. So, All right, David. So we have a lot to discuss in the way of analysis, but first, give me your initial thoughts on the issue, Dave.
The issue, I have to say, like, if I put this first issue to the first issue of Hellblazer,
you mean
where Spurrier took up the mantle again for the Sandman universe, I really dig this first issue more.
Really?
Because it set the tone so perfectly.
Okay, so you liked it better than the one shot that came out, or the true number one?
The one shot that came out that tried to
that bridged everything.
That bridged everything.
Okay.
I enjoyed this more because this felt like true, proper introduction into the Vertigo universe, where you have the introduction of Dream, you have the introduction of technically Swamp Thing.
I know you are so happy because those are two of your favorite characters.
You have our Trinity, Mike. You know, DC Comics has their Trinity of Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman. Well, Vertigo's Trinity is Swamp Thing, John Constantine, and Dream. And it's like, you get all three of them technically.
I'm sure there'll be other comic book fans right now that are like disagreeing with you. How dare you, sir?
How dare you? There's so many other characters.
My Trinity is Zatanna. All of her.
But naked.
Just her.
But like,
that's actually me talking, David. How dare you?
No, trust me. You're not alone. You're not alone in that room, Mike. You're not alone, and that room is very filled with sticky floors.
Wow.
So
But David, I do agree with you that if you were to streamline down Vertigo, even though Vertigo is massive at this point.
Oh yeah.
The three defining characters, I would say, of that imprint, Sandman, John Constantine, and Swamp Thing.
And like having it tied to Constantine's story here is actually really awesome. And then normally you would just go, oh, here's this appearance of Sandman, and he's talking with Constantine. No, they literally show the connection of Constantine to Sandman, and still bridge the fact that this Sandman also continued on. This is not the same Sandman that he dealt with. And I really appreciated one of my favorite moments in the comic was when Constantine turns, and when he's having a conversation with Dream, it is kind of like how Gaiman would do in Sandman, where the characters would address you, the reader.
Mm-hmm.
And when Constantine turns and he's looking at the reader, he says, you're not like I think he says, like, you're not like the last guy that I ran into. You're much more scarier.
Mm-hmm. Because he does. What do you see? Something about a smile?
Yeah, he smiles. And like the other guy was too gothic or something.
Yeah.
And I was like going, thank you for addressing that, because in a way it's a really cool style to tell the audience we're keeping the continuity from the original Vertigo here.
It's also a great way to clue in the reader where we are.
Yes.
Which we'll talk about that towards the end of the show, because we still don't know exactly. A lot of people, before I get there, a lot of people assume, if you look at the wikis, people are categorizing the events of this issue as Prime Earth. We don't know that. That has never been clarified.
Yeah.
It has not been clarified. In fact, it's a big, giant question mark that we actually used as a point of discussion in almost every episode we did covering Spurrier's last run. Because we had thought at some point he was going to let us know. And then by the time we got to the ending, we both agreed that, does it really matter?
Yeah.
Does it really matter where we are? It doesn't. The whole point was just to do a contemporary reset. And the way they did it, you didn't really need to know exactly where we were.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is kind of like, normally people might find that really annoying in a comic book, is not knowing where you are. But because of the universe you're dealing with the Sandman universe, you're dealing with Vertigo. You don't need to. That's part of the joys of those stories, is like they can happen anywhere.
I think sometimes we as comic book fans, we get a little bogged down with needing to know all these different universes and where we are. And sometimes we just got to sit back, and as long as they're not disrupting the Prime universe. Now, I am a canon stickler. I do not like retcons, because I feel like many times it's just a lazy way of writing.
Yeah.
So that will pull me out. But when we're in let's say, an ambiguous universe, sometimes you just got to sit back and enjoy the story and not overthink where we are. And if it becomes necessary to the narrative, vital to the story elements, then perhaps there might be a time where the writer can flesh out exactly where we are.
Yeah. And that's the one thing that I definitely love about it is, like, doing this type of writing still allows you to actually make your story feel like it can happen anywhere.
Correct.
And I do agree with you.
And
like,
we do
I
know
am a continuity stickler to a degree, but not to the point where basically it's continuity controls your narrative.
Right.
Your narrative should actually give us a meaning behind your story. What is the point of your story?
And comic books, especially in the Prime universe, they do typically play fast and loose.
Fast and loose.
You kind of have to with all the titles
Mm-hmm.
happening. All right, so let's get into this. Spurrier didn't waste time, as I had said at the top of the show. He's a man on a mission. In a single issue, he managed to touch on, subtly, mind you, cultural and class hegemony, issues of race, police brutality,
Yes.
all of which were components of a very intriguing metaphor for a society in the throes of change, which is where we are living in currently, in a society in the throes of change, cultural divisions. For example, Morpheus or Dream. No, not Morpheus. Just let's call him Dream, because
it's not Morpheus.
This is probably Daniel Hall's, probably who we're dealing with, correct?
Yes, that is Daniel Hall.
So Dream and the Girl Scout, who referred to herself as your hostess, while you're visiting our lands
Our lands.
appears to be in the midst of some type of power struggle. Based on this alone, Dave, you can see how it is possibly modeled after the political power structures or institutions in the West, particularly the United States. I mean, the title, Dead in America, wasn't just chosen for shits and giggles. There's this idea that the older, established powers are being stripped of authority by a young radical political sect. That's what's happening in today's environment. Of course, we are too early in the story to fully assert the accuracy of this reading. However, considering how some of the best Hellblazer writers dissect and broker discussions and critiques related to the socio-political and cultural paradigms of the moment, it seems like a fair assessment.
Yeah, it does.
That's pretty much the metaphor that's being built here.
And I like the fact that the metaphor, usually when they do Hellblazer writers tackle metaphors like this, it can go over a reader's head and take them out of the story. Here,
you mean because it might be too like nebulous or abstract?
It may be too abstract because like a lot of people actually say that about Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman's writing is way abstract, and it could be a little too much for like everyday reader. The thing I was really impressed with in Dead in America, normal, like mass audiences can read this book, and I feel that they can get what Spurrier is saying.
You can get the gist of it, because you're right, David. Not all readers want to sit down and feel like they're reading a socio-political essay.
Yeah.
And Spurrier seems to be able to walk that line to give the people who are looking for things like that, making sure it's there, but also putting together a straightforward narrative that most readers can just follow.
Yes. And like it really helps that basically he gets paired up with the right artist too. Because the art in this book helps his narrative along because it helps set the tone for a lot of the messaging that he's trying to say. Like it seems like it's right there in the middle of your face, but when Dream is talking to John Constantine and he's talking about the last 50 years, and suddenly you have like the choice of going really abstract and showing the American flag and basically what Dream is talking about, and the underlying tones is like it helps the audience realize, okay, he's talking about the culture, he's talking about the time difference right now, and making sure that not to get lost in what Dream is talking about. And I feel that basically because of the artwork they chose, it really helps set the tone for Dream and basically making sure that the audience doesn't feel overwhelmed by him. Because I used to remember
he's more or less Dream's being used as a plot device.
As a plot device.
To help us understand what's at stake, to help with the plot, pushing it forward, and also to create the mystique and aura of the story of what's needed for that mystery.
Yes.
What is happening? Who are these people? We know most people understand that Dream is God level power. So if he is scared of something to the point that he's enlisting John Constantine, you know that there's a lot at stake.
Yes.
It's a great way to get the story going and to start posing those much needed questions that you have to have before you close out your first issue.
And it makes the reader realize also that this whole time Constantine may be deemed as kind of a yutz going from problem to problem and running away from it. But doing something like this helps also establish that Constantine's no joke. A god is actually coming to him for help.
Yeah.
And that helps actually reestablish that John Constantine is actually very capable. He's capable, but he's very human. He'll make human decisions.
Yeah, and human decisions, David, that's the key phrase there. And it's something we went into detail during our Oblivion Bar, which is our pre-show. that's available on our Patreon page. I'll drop a link if people are interested in hearing that. That's basically a casual version of this show. We get the poison out, we get warmed up, and we tend to talk about. It's always pretty much John Constantine or darker side of DC related,
or even sexual side of DC
Yeah.
when it comes to Zatanna.
That's true, David. That is true. Okay, so as far as character development goes, wait, did I just skip through an entire thought that I was going to say? I did,
I
didn't I?
think you did.
Yes, no, I didn't. I was going in the right direction. But this is what happens when you have a comic book that you really enjoy reading. Your brain's all over the place.
Oh yeah, you're riffing.
Yeah. So all this thought of the human decision, I mean, that's pretty much what Constantine has always been used by writers that are good. He's really been used to just flesh out the human condition and the way regular humans make decisions. I know a lot of us like to pretend John Constantine is this rogue, selfish character that makes all the wrong decisions, but he's probably the most human character in comic book history. He makes decisions like most of us would make decisions. He's a regular person just trying to make decisions. And whether we want to accept this or not, we tend to make selfish decisions that's going to benefit us.
Yes.
How most of us are. That's why it's uncomfortable sometimes reading things like this, because you start to question, I would do that. And he's being painted like he made a bad decision.
He made a bad
What does that
decision.
say about me?
Mm-hmm.
You know? So as far as character development goes, I think a lot of that is playing into what I'm looking forward to seeing the most out of this series, and how the story between Constantine and Noah goes, and how he will save his son, which does seem to be a priority of his, and it should be. I mean, as readers of Hellblazer, we have become accustomed to tragic stories where Constantine makes a disappointing decision or just simply the wrong decision. But it would be interesting to see Constantine struggle this time around in a slightly different way.
Yes.
To actually see him struggle with his inherent utilitarian morality, the concept of the greater good that he lives by, which is, in fact, at the heart of his characterization. I would like to see him struggle with the way he makes those types of decisions. Because is he going to make a greater good decision if it means his son's going to die?
Exactly. And that's the thing about, I know a lot of readers who are familiar with Constantine, the Constantine mythos, are like saying, well, this is the same situation he found himself in with his niece.
Mhm.
And I remember talking to a friend of mine about this and saying, no, this is even deeper. The niece one hurt John. The niece one, at the end of that story, you could tell Constantine felt guilty about putting his niece into that situation.
Mm-hmm.
But this is his son. This is someone he brought into the world. He's the one who brought Noah into this world physically, and now with all these problems with all the
wasn't
magic.
Noah conceived on like a
Noah-
cemetery slab?
Yeah,
like
Noah was conceived
a tombstone?
on a tombstone by Constantine. And like the niece one is personal to him because, well, that's his family. That's his sister's kid. But it's different now because this is his kid. This is his ultimate decision. He brought Noah into this world. So like it was different with his niece because he didn't bring his niece into the world.
Right.
She chose to be in this world. The difference with Noah is Noah didn't choose to be in this world. Constantine forced his son into this world.
Yeah, and then I believe he encouraged him to kill the guy, right? He had to
he
kill
killed
that
Tom, he encouraged
Willow Tree.
Willow
Was it?
Tree.
Yeah.
And like that damned his son's soul. And in a lot of ways, that's why this is actually even a bigger step for Constantine's character, because now, just like what you said, it makes him change his thinking of, well, I have to do what's for the greater good.
Yeah.
Are you willing to do this now? Because this is now personal to John.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought the difference between the niece and the son, because I'm fairly certain this will be more than just the typical abstract or conceptual thematic element, and something more like a recurring motif that will aid readership comprehension throughout. In other words, it's going to be used more overtly
Yeah.
to contribute to narrative meaning and the shaping of the story. And there's some supporting points that we can actually draw attention to. If you look at page 8, the dialogue from the demon, we anticipate you will lie, cheat, betray in pursuit of whatever flexible definition of the greater good you presently choose to adopt. So right there, you're calling out and questioning John Constantine's utilitarian leanings. The idea of consequentialism, which we've talked about in other discussions.
Yeah.
So you're bringing attention to the aspect of the greater good. And then if you look at page 10, the demon, I'm assuming it's a demon or some entity.
I'm going to say it's an entity for right now because it's more powerful than a demon.
Right. The Girl Scout.
Yes.
We'll just call her the Girl Scout. She just blurts out, he wants to know if the ultimate responsibility, these are key words used in ethical texts, ultimate responsibility, especially when connected to the aspects of consequentialism and utilitarianism. If the ultimate responsibility for all the above, which is Noah's damnation, blah, 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 all that was explored in, I think, page 9, all the trauma that derives from it lies firmly and exclusively with him. So the fact that you have those two moments in page 8 and page 10, drawing attention to his utilitarian and consequentialism leanings, it's going to play more than just an abstract part.
Yes.
They're going to be calling into question his actual ethics. Now, I'm not saying they're going to, have some type of tribunal. My point is that they're going to be using this as a platform for continual characterization or dissection of his characterization.
I think it's going to be a dissection because, the thing that I liked
because
what
how
Spurrier
long
did was his first storyline of Hellblazer, it established John Constantine's beliefs. And now Spurrier's going to get a chance to have John Constantine question those beliefs. Because that was the strength of the original Hellblazer run back in the day when Vertigo. Constantine was faced with all these cases where he was the watcher. He could not make that decision, but he always was left scarred because he was saying, did I make the right decision? Or would I have made the right decision?
Yeah.
And when it comes to this story, I think it's going to be really personal to him because it's going to be one of those times when we might actually see Constantine have to dissect or cut out some of his prior beliefs and change his beliefs.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to. That because it's going to be less abstract and more of a tangible presence, this whole idea of his code of ethics, that I think it's gonna be a time where he has to reflect on this even more so than he has in the past, which I find it interesting. I do. I love, listen, philosophy is one of my majors, so I love the idea of ethics and the exploration of morality. Now, if people aren't familiar, I'm going to say this one more time because we may have new listeners floating in because this is Cy Spurrier's new run. Consequentialism is an ethical and moral theory that's based on the greater good, essentially. And there's two forms of consequentialism that I would say fit within the mold of John Constantine. Now, there's one that you make the decision, let's say you make the decision based on the greater good. Now, it's deemed morally good if the outcome is, say, good.
Good.
Then there's another version of consequentialism that will deem your decision good sheerly on what the outcome is.
Yes.
Not intentions. So if your intention was good, but it ended horribly for everyone, well, then at the end of it, the moral decision was a bad one. Whereas the first one is based on intention. So let's say your intentions were good by going with the greater good, but it ends bad. Well, it was still a morally good decision because your intentions were good.
Yes. And
So when we talk about consequentialism and utilitarianism over the next 8 issues or so, just remember, bookmark this moment in case you need a reminder.
yeah, and like the big thing about understanding those concepts, just to further, I guess, educate our listeners and basically get them geared up
For context.
For context,
Yeah.
to truly understand the philosophies that we're going to be discussing, easiest thing to do is just to go back and actually see stories about World War II, because England is infamous for this type of philosophy, the philosophy of utilitarianism, where it's the greater good must be chosen over the minority. Or for like pop culture references, think of Star Trek, Wrath of Khan, Spock's decision of the greater good.
Well, you know what? We can even point to something that's even more relevant in the pop culture zeitgeist currently, and that's Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer, there you go.
That movie is 100% steeped in the ideas of utilitarianism.
Yeah. And that's so that people can understand what we're going to be talking about, because I agree with you. Utilitarianism has been with Constantine for his character's narrative for the longest time since its conception.
Yeah, since the beginning.
And yes, it's because like Constantine, his character was from that culture. He's from that English culture, and they're very steeped in that idealism. But like now, no one's really gone to try to challenge it like Spurrier is now.
Yeah. If that's in fact what he's doing, which listen, let's challenge it. That's what makes reading this type of stuff fun.
Oh yeah, yeah.
All right, so Dream's involvement, we touched on most of it, but as a Vertigo or fan of the darker side of DC, it's a very cool inclusion, despite its necessity, for story purposes.
Yes.
Not only does this just make sense from a cosmological viewpoint, John Constantine and Dream are both characters that have long been of a similar DC tapestry, but it also shows how a writer can adhere to the roots of a character's cosmology, or I should say a cosmology a character is a part of, without falling into the contemporary trappings of nostalgia.
Yes.
And that's an issue, I should say, that is currently plaguing almost every, and I do say almost, or let me confirm, almost every IP that is older than 2 or 3 decades.
Yes. And that's the thing is
Star Wars, Star Trek, case in point. They're stuck in the past.
Oh, they're stuck in the past.
And you can point to any of your favorite IPs that have been around more than, say, 20 years. They keep returning to the well. And they refuse to move forward because of nostalgia reasons.
Yes.
And I'm burnt down all of it. Let's start moving forward. So this is a good idea to adhere to, I don't even want to say nostalgic designs, but adhering to just things that you have to adhere to in order to tell a story that feels authentic to the origins of a character. So it seems more about being authentic than about, hey guys, remember Dream? You guys remember Sandman, right?
Yes.
And then relying on nostalgia to sell the comic, which is what a lot of people do nowadays.
Well, especially since for me, this moment too actually helps kind of push one of the bigger mysteries of Hellblazer forward even more, is like, ever since Spurrier started with issue 0, the one question all of us fans was, is this Earth Prime or is this a different universe that John got sucked into? And using this right here, this moment, kind of helps spread out those breadcrumbs more to actually lead us to the answer of where John Constantine is. And doing this, the reason why I love this was, like, to me as a fan and as a reader, this helped establish more that Constantine is not in Prime DC. He's in Vertigo's universe.
Well, are we sure, though? Because that's the thing. If you remember, let's go back to that one shot. Now, we do know that this specific John Constantine is our original John Constantine. because he ripped him from a near death scene when he was dying during the Books of Magic storyline, correct?
Yes.
So they ripped a dying John Constantine. But if you remember Books of Magic, that wasn't actually the Constantine we were following.
Yes.
That was a Constantine we saw in passing.
In passing. And that
It
was
was
the
a
thing.
future, right?
Yes.
It was what if the Books of Magic kid
Yeah,
became
Tim.
evil, and it was the future they were seeing.
Yeah.
Correct? If I
Because
remember
they-
correctly,
Yeah, because it was supposed to be like instead of Tim becoming a hero,
he became a villain.
he became a villain. And Constantine, during his death, was blaming himself for actually teaching Tim.
Right. So in the one shot that came out in 2019, when Spurrier launched this new era of John Constantine, he took that John Constantine, the one that I don't think we ever actually got to,
Yes.
because those events didn't happen, right?
Yes. Those didn't. It didn't happen at that
Time.
At that time.
So he rips that Constantine from that reality, which is a Vertigo reality,
Yes.
and puts him in a place that we don't know.
That we don't know quite yet. But doing this with Dream,
But it's very
actually-
similar to the
Exactly.
Vertigo world.
It's very similar to the Vertigo world when you look at like what he is definitely trying to establish with not just Dream, but it's going to be interesting what he does with Swamp Thing.
Now, listeners out there, I know we probably have a few flubs when we were trying to walk ourselves through the events of Books of Magic, but it's been a long time since we've
dude,
reread that or have
Books
read
of
that.
Magic is so complicated.
It's a beautiful, and dude, it's one of my favorite stories. I just can't remember every aspect of it, but the gist of it, we're correct.
Yes, the
We-
gist of
the
it is
gist of it.
the overall gist is all these magical beings of the DC universe were set. Number one, it was set to establish the magic side of DC,
Yeah.
and then
Let's not go too far
Yeah.
into the weeds and confuse
the whole
people.
the whole story revolves around Tim
Mhm.
learning from all these characters and learning from the DC universe magic side,
Yeah.
and if
If
he can become a hero.
If you haven't read it, go back and read, and then look for our discussion on it. It is probably on my top 5 books of all time.
Oh, absolutely, mine too. Because like, it's everyone calls it like Harry Potter for DC universe, but I'm like going, no. This was before Harry Potter.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. Who's the writer that did Harry Potter? I do like her. She's a capable writer.
Oh my God, I forgot. I'm blinking on her name.
Let's just do what the internet calls, and they call her a turf, right? Let's
Turf.
just-
Just call her a turf.
isn't that what the internet's calling it right now?
Yeah.
I forgot her name. Completely forgot. But in a lot of ways, she kind of ripped Gaiman's idea.
She did.
Yeah.
That's why I was like cracking up that when you read Books of Magic, you go, hey, this is before Harry Potter. What the hell?
Yeah.
But like when it comes to,
Or at least she was inspired. I don't like to say ripped. Inspired. We're all inspired by other people's work at this point. So
but it would be one thing, going back to this moment with Dream, it'd be one thing if it was just, he introduces the fact that it's Dream, right? Dream in all black. But he makes the point that basically he says, no, this is Daniel Hall. This is
he
the Dream.
He doesn't say his name.
He doesn't say his name, but it's obvious from
that
like,
he is separate but the same.
separate from but the same.
Speaks almost like almost all deities that speak in the first person.
Yes.
And they are no longer what they were, but at the same time they merge as one, and they have the same type of consciousness, but they're also distinctly different.
Distinctly different, because he does that really well in conjunction with the placement of the speech bubbles, as funny as it sounds, because you have Dream talking with All White, but then he'll switch his voice around to be the other Dream, which is Morpheus, where it's all black.
And that was in the I guess you can say a flashback sequence, or is that what it
Yes.
was?
It was a flashback sequence, and also he does it when he needs to, quote unquote, intimidate John Constantine.
Yeah.
Or remind him of who he is.
So, David, that being said, so as far as story goes, the issue's plot, I guess moving forward, will seemingly be devised by utilizing a plot point from Sandman, dealing with the theft of the sand, which has tipped the balance of power. And this is the aspect that takes us back to the original Sandman story. And now something obscene, as Dream calls it, has slithered into America and have usurped his power in the American unconscious.
Yes.
So it seems like John Constantine and Dream have reached a deal. Their agendas are aligned. Dream will save John and John's son if John goes after the new elusive enemy that has infiltrated America. It's also, as you mentioned, David, it's also worth mentioning that, yes, we know that this is a different Dream, but also the same. We're pretty sure it is the new iteration, Daniel Hall.
Yes.
You don't really need to know this to understand the
You don't.
context of events, but if you pay attention to how Dream spoke of himself, his behavior, as you were alluding to or mentioning, and his appearance, it's clear we are dealing with the new Dream.
New Dream.
But then at the end, the way they end the issue,
This right
it
here.
also throws more question marks at us. Because when John goes to seek out Swamp Thing,
his Swamp Thing.
at least he assumes it is.
Yes.
And perhaps it is, but I'm leaning into the idea that it perhaps is not. And whoever this Swamp Thing ends up being, it will clue us in a big way where we are. Because when John Constantine says, "This is John Constantine, Alec Holland," the one who replies says, "I do not know these names."
Names. And then, like,
So are we dealing with Ram v Swamp Thing? Because if we
exactly.
are, then we are in the Prime universe.
Exactly. And that's why
Or Prime Earth, I should say.
That's what I liked about playing around with this mystery, because this is an ongoing mystery
No, it's fun.
for that Sisbury has been pointing out. And actually, this moment is actually one of the moments in the stories that had me a little kind of like, it hit me in the soul, so to speak, where, you know, we actually get to see Constantine kind of mourning and basically grieving where his friend is, because he feels alone. And like, there's that moment when he basically says, he screams for number one, Alec Holland.
Yeah.
And then he says, or whatever you are calling yourself these days, earth-shattering news, John Constantine needs help. And then he gets really sad and he goes, fuck. And it's like, you can tell, I like that whole page setup, because it really sets up not just the relationship that Constantine has with Alec Holland, aka Swamp Thing, but also the fact that Constantine at this moment, he's like a fish out of water right now.
Well, he already was, because
And he was from the very beginning.
If you go back to Cy Spurrier's original run, he was already a fish out of water, because he was he was a man out of time.
He was a man out of time.
He skipped what? How you took a John Constantine from what, the late 80s?
Yes.
And a time that was very different into a contemporary timeline. That's the change there. That's, if you go back and read, that's the biggest difference, is that you're in a different time.
Yeah.
So he's already a man who is kind of out of sync with the world around him.
But not only that,
And he was alone. Wasn't that the whole point of the first 12 issues, was to establish that this is a John Constantine completely alone for the first time and isolated?
Yeah.
He has no friends, no allies, no one to help him.
No one
He
to
is
help him.
100% by himself. And now here we are again. So I think that goes back to what you were saying, that sitting on the bench, you know, perhaps there was a little bit of anticipation that he was going to finally have someone in his life that he's familiar with.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is kind of like, this is the one moment where I'm like going, I really do feel sorry for John Constantine, because it's kind of like the one person that he's always called back for help is not here right now. And it goes into like the line of,
we're
like,
not sure yet, but
you're not sure, but like in the first part of Cy Spurrier's run, when Constantine meets that one, I think it was the one witch that basically says that, oh yeah, we moved away from England. We moved in to San Francisco. And like, when he gets into that, you get that sense that Constantine's like going, all my family, quote unquote family, are gone.
Everything
There's
he knows
no
is
one
gone,
there anymore. And then it was like, this is the moment as comic book fans where we like go, oh man, yeah, this is like him almost hitting rock bottom when it comes to, are your friends / family around you? No, you got no one.
Yeah.
And
Well, we're gonna find out real soon who this is. I'm a little torn. A part of me wants this to be in a Vertigo version
I do too.
of a reality.
I do too.
But then we know Ram V Swamp Thing resides on Prime Earth.
Yes.
And I really fucking dig Ram V Swamp Thing.
Oh, Ram V Swamp Thing's amazing. The way the fact that he's tackled and pushed the mythos of that side of magic when it comes to DC is amazing what he's done.
Yeah. So we'll see. Only a few short weeks away to the next issue. Overall, I like how the issues, I should say the issue started with John Constantine near death, climbing up the mountainside where the Hollywood sign is located. He sees a porn shoot happening and it distracts him enough to where he tumbles and falls, which I thought was just a brilliant way. It maintained the humorous side to Hellblazer comics. Believe it or not, there is an air of humor there many times, especially with how John Constantine acts, his cynicism, or even actions like that he gets distracted because he sees a porn shoot.
He sees a porn
and
shoot.
then he falls where he's pretty much a corpse. And that panel on that first page where he says, fuck, shit, bastard, piss. And he just falls down the fucking slope. It is really fucking funny. It's such a great way to start the issue.
It's like the Homer Simpson thing.
Yeah.
When he falls down the cliff, and I'm like going, John, this is gonna be a John Constantine story where we're gonna have fun watching the fall of John Constantine.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's also, I'm getting to my final thoughts here. In fact, this is all pretty much my final thoughts. And then just that last bit, the comments on class and the driving ethical and economical forces behind social and economic stratification you have on page 20 when Dream talks about Rachel stealing the bag of sand.
Yes.
An interesting yardstick, he says, for a civilization. Wouldn't you say? Does one blame the thief or the forces which impoverished them? So that's an interesting philosophical thought that I assume they're going to continue to flesh out, since the bag of sand in itself is a major plot device in the story. So, David, my RMD score is 94%. It is a great start. I am really, really excited for this year because I know that for at least 8 months, we have new John Constantine stories.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What are your final thoughts?
I 100% I'm with you on this comic in general. Like, I love the establishment of what Cy Spurrier did. My score is pretty much the same as yours. It's a 95 that I have written down. Some of the things that I really dig is a lot of the humor hits well with me in this book.
Yeah.
Where, like, in the past in Cy Spurrier, it's kind of where it's hit and miss, where it was kind of like, okay, I can feel he's trying to find his groove when it comes to his delivery of some of the lines. In this particular, all the freaking jokes landed with me. Like the fact when Constantine realizes he's in a dream and his hand is like constantly doing the sign for hand job. And it's like, then he comes to realize, oh, I'm in a dream. And it leads to one of my favorite pages of all throughout the entire comic, which is the reintroduction of Dream, where he basically starts off as Daniel Hall with the white bubbles, but then switches right to Morpheus Dream. Mm-hmm. And he basically says, you lied to me. Because we all know in the original Hellblazer run, Constantine lied to Morpheus. He kept a couple of the sand grains to kind of make Rachel's last moments better. And yeah, Constantine lied to a god. But like, it was for Constantine, and in a lot of ways, it kind of puts it into really great parallel with the current story he's in. That was a moment when Constantine had to make a personal choice, mm-hmm. where he stole a few of the grains of sand to make Rachel's last moments better. You take it a couple of years later, he's in the same spot where he's looking at his son and basically saying, I have to make a personal decision.
Yep.
What am I going to do?
That's a great connection.
When all this time, I've always said the greater good. I got to make the chances for the greater good. The one time he didn't make a chance for the greater good was Rachel. And then all of a sudden now, Flash forward a couple of years, here he is again, and he has to make a decision against the greater good with his son because it's for his son's benefit. It's not for the world's benefit, it's for his son's benefit.
Yeah.
And I like how Spurrier, just like you said, he doesn't use like these moments for fans as nostalgic moments. He uses them to connect his narrative and still continue to push these characters forward. All the characters that he brings in, it'd be one thing if he, just like what you alluded to earlier, if Dream shows up and just says, it's Dream, a dream of the endless. That's it. That'd be one thing. It'd be almost like, Star Wars, where they bring in Luke Skywalker for a flash, right? Just flashing enjoyment like candy for the eyes. Here, he's bringing back Dream, but he's also making sure to use Dream's appearance to establish the time frame he's probably alluding to. He's alluding to basically the narrative, which is time has passed and basically things have changed. So that's the difference in what I see in Spurrier using quote unquote nostalgia for.
Yeah.
He's using it for his narrative, where people would just use it for entertainment purposes. So overall, again, I give this story a 95%.
Yeah. I feel like we should say something negative, but there's nothing negative to say. Like I like to be fair. I like to be fair in discussions. Number one, because I don't like to be categorized as a fanboy, which is what everyone does. If you like something, oh, you're a fanboy and you never see the wrongs. I'm like, no, I'm a pretty unbiased reader and consumer of content. If something is good, let's say then I'm going to say it's good. But if there's something that's less than stellar, I'll call it out. But I don't feel like this first issue really had anything that would drag the narrative down. I don't feel like it's convoluted. It very easily could have become convoluted when we look at all the things he's utilizing. I mean, there's a lot of plate spinning.
And there's no wasted space.
No. So it's just the only reason why I didn't give it a higher score is because we're just getting started. Mm-hmm. But I don't really find very much fault, or I haven't found very much fault in this first issue. And it seems like most of the readers agree. If you go to the comic book roundup site, the general consensus seems to be that it is standing at a 9.4%, which is very similar to our current RMD score for our network.
And like when you think about it, I mean, our one negatives that I can recall in the past with Hellblazer, there were times when the art, like Aaron Campbell, would go above and beyond and go really abstract, but you can't even say that here.
Yeah, Campbell, I love his art. I truly love his art, but there are moments at times that he does bleed a little too much into the abstract, and it's kind of hard to see what's really happening. This issue didn't have that at all. It seems like he pulled back a bit. He kept his style intact, but he pulled back. And made things. I guess you can say he reified the imagery a bit more.
Yeah, it seems like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our discussion. If you have never left us a review in iTunes or Apple Podcast, I should say, please give us a thumbs up and give us a 4-star and a review. We do need that in order to keep doing these shows. Also, if you want to get more discussions from us, head over to patreon.com/rainmandigital and pledge just $1 a month or $10 for the year, and you'll gain access to our Oblivion Bar discussions. All right. Thank you, David.
Thank you.